There are 5 institutional forces repositioning XRP right now, and the one in every headline this week is ranked only number 4. The story is a rumored BlackRock fund and a building price surge bet. That bet is real, but it is one step on the ladder of 5. And the step everybody's staring at is not the one that actually decides where your XRP bag goes. The step that does is sitting underneath it, and almost nobody is naming it. So here's the deal. For the next 10 minutes, I am going to rank the 5 institutional forces actually repositioning your XRP from the one that matters least to the one that matters the most. The famous ETF is in there. It is not at the top. And I am holding the number 1 step until the end because once you see it, the ETF headline reads completely differently. XRP sits at $1.12 right now. Where it goes from here completely depends on which of these 5 steps you're actually watching. Let me kill the wrong answer first because almost everybody is giving it. The loudest videos in your feed answer what moves XRP with a price target or a is this an ETF tease? $5, $8, is this finally the one? They treat a rumored ETF like a starting gun. It is not. An ETF is a wrapper. A wrapper needs rails to wrap around, and those rails have to exist first. The people pricing the ETF as the catalyst are pricing step 4 as if it's step 1. So let me give you the real ladder from bottom to top. Step 1 is the freshest signal we have, and it's the money itself. Crypto ETF flows flipped net positive this week. BlackRock's spot fund led with about 57 million in roughly 2/3 of all the money that moved that day. After weeks of bleeding red, the flows went green. And that's not XRP specific yet, but it is the tide. And the tide turned the same week the XRP ETF talk got loud. If you want the actual ranking instead of another, this is the headline, hit that like button and subscribe right now because the step that keeps getting skipped is the exact one that decides this for XRP. Step 2 is where XRP itself shows up. The same week the tide turned, XRP's own funds took in 5.3 million through Franklin's product. I'll be honest with you, that number is small. 5.3 million is a rounding error next to BlackRock's 57 million, but magnitude is not the point. The direction is. Money started moving into XRP funds the same week it started moving into crypto overall. So that's step 2. It's not a flood yet, but they're moving through the same door. Step 3 never makes the headline, and it's bigger than both. Ripple already moved its own regulated stablecoin called RLUSD, sitting near 1.8 billion. That makes it the 3rd largest US regulated stablecoin on the market. And why does a stablecoin matter for your XRP? Because it is the on-ramp. RLUSD is the dollar that moves across Ripple's rails, and every dollar that flows through those rails makes XRP's settlement layer more used, not less. So drop a comment. Which one of these 5 do you think matters most? Before I get to my ranking, because by the end, you'll see why the obvious one is not number 1. Step 4 is the one in every headline this week, and you can see it in context. A BlackRock XRP ETF would be huge. It would give every institution a clean, regulated way to hold XRP without touching a wallet. But here is the honest read, and it is the whole reason this step 4 is not step 1. A BlackRock XRP ETF does not exist yet. It is speculation. The expectation is building. The price is reacting to the expectation, but no spot XRP ETF is approved and trading in the US right now. An ETF is the wrapper. It only matters as much as the rails underneath it, and those rails are step 1 through step 3. Subscribe and like the video because I'll walk you through exactly what to do with your position as each of these rails connects. The plan, the day it lands, no price guessing, and obviously it's not financial advice. Now look at why the order matters so much, because there is a precedent for exactly this. Grayscale's head of research said plainly that XRP is mispriced. He said a repricing is in order, but only if the regulation clarity arrives. Read that carefully. He did not say the price moves on its own. He said it moves when the legal question is answered. That is the bridge from rails to repricing, and it runs one way only. Rails first, then access, than the price. If you have been pricing BlackRock's XRP ETF as if it were already approved and trading, say so in the comments, because most holders are doing it and have not realized it is still just speculation. Which brings us to the top of the ladder. Step 5, the number one move that actually decides whether the other 4 mean anything. It is the one piece of legislation sitting in Washington right now. The Clarity Act advanced out of the Senate Banking Committee by a vote 15-9. It is the bill that finally answers in writing whether XRP is a commodity or a security. That single legal question is why so many US institutions never touched it, and it is why it sits above the ETF. A BlackRock XRP ETF cannot get legal approval until that legal status is settled. The ETF is downstream of the clause. The flows are downstream of the clause, and every step below that is the one waiting on this one. So send this to an XRP holder in your circle who is about to buy purely off the ETF headline because they read the ranking before the rumor. So why does a bill outrank a BlackRock product? Because of timing. And this is the trap most holders are walking into. The Clarity Act is not passed. It still needs a full Senate vote, and that needs 60 votes, which means it needs Democrats to cross over. Lawmakers are now saying the realistic window is before the end of July, right before the Senate breaks for the summer. So roughly 8 weeks of calendar remain, and the bill is fighting a dozen others for floor time. So the institutions waiting on the sideline is not waiting on BlackRock, it is waiting on that vote. So here is the actual answer to the question you clicked on. Which institutional move actually moves XRP? Not the ETF, at least not first. The ranking, bottom to top, is the flows, the XRP fund seed, the RLUSD rail, the ETF wrapper, and then at the very top, the Clarity Act clause that unlocks all 4. The ETF is real and coming, but it is the wrapper, not the engine. The engine is the rails connecting underneath it, and the switch that turns those rails on is that 1 Senate vote. So anybody selling you the ETF as the catalyst is skipping the one step that decides whether the ETF even arrives. Which means your move is not the one the hype videos are selling. The committed read is this: watch the rails, not the wrapper. If you hold XRP, the decision is to track 3 things in order: the flow staying green, the RLUSD rail growing, and that Senate floor vote landing. It is not to chase the ETF rumor at $1.13 and panic when the vote slips to August. The people who buy purely off the ETF headline become the exit liquidity for people who understood the order of operations. And here is the one thing that could flip everything I just ranked. Watch those crypto ETF flows. They flipped green this week, but they have been red for weeks before that. If they flip net negative again, the whole institutional ladder is on pause. Every step of it, no matter what the ETF headlines say. That is the single number that invalidates this entire thesis, not the price, but the flows. So the answer is simple now that you have the order right. The BlackRock XRP ETF is real, but it is step 4. Plus the rails and the clause underneath it are what decides whether it even matters. The next real question is which of those rails connect first. I broke down the RLUSD and OCC charter mechanisms and the exact Senate floor math. You can actually click on the video on your screen right now. Watch that next, like the video, subscribe, tap that notification bell so that the next future rail breakdowns land in your feed the day I release the video, and I'll see you in the next one.